All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack some truly groundbreaking and honestly visually stunning research from the Journal of Experimental Marine Biology and Ecology. We are looking at exactly how different shark species react to the sun and air when they're pulled out of the water. It's a fascinating physiological puzzle, and it has some absolutely massive implications for how we interact with these ocean predators.
Now, I know the question sounds like the setup to a bad joke, right? What happens to a cold-blooded shark when it gets a sunburn? But the answer is actually a profound scientific mystery. Unlocking this could completely change the game for marine conservation, especially when it comes to the catch-and-release fishing industry.
So, let's start with part 1, the catch and release problem.
Before we get into the crazy data, we just need a super quick biology refresher. With a few exceptions, like great whites, most sharks are ectothermic. In plain English, that means they rely entirely on their surrounding ambient environment, the ocean, to regulate their body heat. Their physiology is perfectly fine-tuned to the exact temperature of water around them.
And this brings us to the hidden danger of air exposure. Think about what happens when fishermen, whether commercial or just recreational, pull these animals onto a boat. Even if it's just to remove a hook or snap a quick photo, they're pulling the shark into a totally alien environment. That sudden blast of warm air and direct sunlight risks severe thermal shock. We really have to wonder, is this brief exposure accidentally killing them, even after they're seemingly released safely back into the water?
Which brings us to part 2, the infrared shark experiment.
To figure this out, researchers set up a really rigorous field experiment. They safely caught 62 individual sharks across 10 different species using standard drum lines. Now, to make sure the animals stayed safe, they limited the air exposure to exactly 5 minutes, while constantly pumping seawater over their gills. And during those 5 minutes, they used advanced, non-invasive infrared cameras to monitor exactly what was happening to the shark's skin temperatures.
Going into this, the baseline scientific assumption was pretty straightforward. They basically hypothesized that a cold-blooded animal taken out of the water would just passively and uniformly heat up in the sun. The idea was simply, a shark is a shark, and its whole body is just going to get warmer on the deck of a boat.
But as you can see from the thermal imaging, that hypothesis was totally busted. Instead of a boring, uniform warring pattern all over, the cameras revealed some bizarre, highly variable, and completely species-specific thermal reactions. The heat is absolutely not distributed evenly.
Let's zoom in on a wild example in part 3, hammerheads under the sun. The data for hammerheads was just staggering. In literally 5 minutes of air exposure, great hammerhead sharks experienced a massive maximum temperature jump of up to 7 degrees Celsius. For an animal that completely relies on a stable environment to survive, that is an incredibly fast spike.
Look at the direct contrast here. On one side, you have the hammerhead, and its head is practically glowing red hot from the localized heating. Now compare that to the sandbar shark next to it, which is keeping a relatively stable, uniform, and cool temperature profile. So why is the hammerhead reacting so violently to the sun?
Well, it all comes down to biology. The hammerhead's uniquely shaped head, called the cephalofoil, has a super high surface area to volume ratio. It's basically acting like a giant biological solar panel, absorbing massive amounts of heat incredibly quickly. This rapid thermal shock might actually be the exact reason why hammerheads have such famously high mortality rates when caught and released.
But hammerheads aren't the only ones breaking the rules. Let's look at part 4.
Bizarre balls and nurses.
These conceptual models map out the heat distribution, and they show us that heat regulation isn't just some passive thing. There are active, complex physiological processes happening right under the skin. Basically, different shark bodies have totally distinct, localized reactions to being pulled out of the water.
Okay, get this. Nurse sharks actually cool down on their bellies. It's called ventral cooling, and researchers think it might be a way of dissipating heat from their struggling red muscles after getting hooked. Meanwhile, bull sharks did something completely different. Their heads were significantly warmer than the surrounding ocean water from the second they were caught, and they maintained that heat while in the air.
This warm-headed trait in bull sharks is an absolute shocker. It highly suggests they might actually have a specialized, previously unknown way to maintain their brain temperature, a form of localized endothermy. It's similar to the countercurrent heat exchangers found in tunas, and honestly, it completely challenges everything we thought we knew about bull sharks being strictly cold-blooded.
So what do we do with all this chaotic data? Let's get into part 5, rethinking fisheries conservation.
Researchers used some complex multivariate analysis to neatly sort these 10 species into 5 distinct functional groups based on their thermal survival profiles. Group A has our extremely sensitive hammerheads, Group C has the bizarrely cooling nurse sharks, and Group D holds our newly discovered warm-headed bull sharks.
And notice how huge that biological factor slice is. It definitively proves that the size of the shark and the specific part of its body are actually almost 10 times more predictive of its thermal shock than the actual temperature of the water it was pulled from.
This brings us to Group E, the blacktip sharks. Blacktips were actually the only species out of the 10 to exhibit that uniform, full-body increase in surface temperature that scientists originally expected for all sharks. Because their whole body heats up all at once, it perfectly explains why young, immature blacktips so rarely survive being handled. They just literally cannot regulate the shock.
Ultimately, when we plot out these distinct physiological groupings, the big takeaway is crystal clear. A one-size-fits-all approach to handling captured sharks simply does not work. A hammerhead's biological needs are fundamentally different from a sandbar shark's needs.
So, what should you really take away from this explainer? If our goal is to catch and release these animals safely so they can live another day, our fishing regulations desperately need an upgrade. We have to account for the specific species on the line, the total length of the animal, and the ambient temperature of the day. Keeping a massive hammerhead out of the water for photos on a hot summer day, that's practically a death sentence.
As we've seen today, the survival of these incredible predators completely relies on understanding their highly unique physiologies. It's not just about getting them back into the water quickly, it's about minimizing the thermal trauma while they're out of it. It really leaves us to wonder, how many other cold-blooded assumptions are just waiting to be busted by the lens of an infrared camera? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.